Broadcasting live from Houston, Texas, and around the world. TV host, best-selling author, and radio personality Brad Gilmore brings you a collection of conversations with stars from movies.
Matthew McConaughey.
Brad Gilmore.
Mark Wahlberg.
Hey, how are you?
The one and only Sydney Sweeney joins us. Sydney, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Tom Hanks and Robin Wright in my favorite movie of the year. Guys, thanks so much for joining the show.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you. Jessica Alba and Lizzie Mathis. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Kevin Costner joins us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Television.
Jimmy Fallon joins us this morning. Jimmy, how you doing, my friend?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Brad, for having me. I appreciate this, bud.
One of my all-time favorites, Vince Vaughn, joins us right now. Vince, thanks, man.
Oh, great to be with you, Brad, and great to be talking to Houston. Good morning to you.
We got Owen Wilson. We got Judy Greer. Thanks for joining the show, guys.
Thank you.
Jay Leno joins us. Jay, how you doing?
Hey, Brad, what's going on?
We got Anna Sawai joining the show. Anna, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brad.
Music.
Lola Monroe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The legendary frontman of AC/DC, Brian Johnson, joins us right now. Brian, how you doing?
Good morning, Brad. What looking to talk to me funny, lad.
Megan Trainor.
Thank you so much, Brad. You're awesome.
Paris Hilton, the infinite icon herself, is on the show. Paris, love the film.
Thank you. I'm so proud of it.
And more. This is The Collection. Now your host, The Boat.
Brad Gilmore! And joining me right now is a guy whose work I've read, whose work I've appreciated, and I can't believe I have the distinct honor and privilege to be speaking to him at this current juncture and moment in time. He is the man behind Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Who Censored Roger Rabbit, Who Plugged Roger Rabbit in general. You know him as Gary K. Wolf. Gary, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Well, look, first off, thank you too. Yeah.
Well, first off, congratulations. I know that I think it was as of last year, Roger Rabbit is kind of back in the Gary Wolf household in its entirety, and that has to be quite the exciting thing.
Yeah, it is. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that happened without getting into too much legalese.
Sure.
The writers of America, the songwriters of America, apparently have a very powerful lobby in Congress. And in the early 1990s, I think it was, they went to Congress and said, look, we sold our songs to music publishers in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Music publishers made a ton of money on it. We got nothing. So how about you pass a law saying that after 35 years, we can get the rights back? And Congress said, sure, why not? Go ahead. There turns out there's a loophole in that law that also applies to book writers, people who sold their books to like a movie production company after 35 years can get the rights back. So what happened was I had written a 12-episode TV series called Harry Wolf. And Harry Wolf is a literal wolf, Harry, Harry Wolf. He's a detective, and he's working at a jazz club in Toontown. And I got a lot of interest from ABC, CBS, Netflix, all the usual suspects. But they all had one question. And he said, do you have the right to use Toontown? And I asked my attorney, he said, I don't know, you got to go to an intellectual property guy for that. So I went to a young woman who did that kind of work. And I said, hey, look, do I have the right to use Toontown? And she looked at my contract and said, she said, you qualify under the 35-year law. And I said, what's that? And she explained it to me. She said, after 35 years, you can get the rights back to Roger Rabbit. And I said, no way. There's no way that could happen. Disney is not going to let that happen. And she said, they don't have any choice. It's a law. So it turns out, yes, it was a law. It turned out I did qualify. It turns out that it's not a walk in the park to do it. It's fairly straightforward and fairly simple, but you have to meet a lot of the appropriate deadlines, and you have to do a lot of things and cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's. which we did. I had to come up with the exact date, 35 years after I sold them the rights. And if I put in my paperwork a day early or a day late, too bad, come back 35 years later. So I hired an attorney who specialized in that kind of work, and he gave me the date, which was June 12th of last year. I hired another attorney who also did that work and set him to the task without telling him what the first attorney had done, and he came up with the same date. So we submitted all the appropriate paperwork, which was relatively simple. And as of June 12th, I assumed that the earth would open and Mickey would come up from hell and grab me and drag me to hell, but that didn't happen. Disney realized that they did not have any way of getting out of this, that it was a law, and on the day that it happened, they said, "Here's the rights. God bless you. Go have fun." I knew that they were not going to put up a fight because 2 years earlier, I had to notify them that I was going to do this. That was one of the requirements. 2 years before it happened, I had to actually notify them that I was going to get the rights back. And they took a look at it, and they immediately said to their vendors, stop making Roger Rabbit merchandise because we don't own that character anymore. So there was no pushback from Disney. And I have the rights, American law, so I only have American rights, which means that when I do movies, TV series, cartoons, merchandise, whatever, I can only sell them in the United States. But hey, the United States is a pretty big place. And there's a lot of Roger Rabbit fans from Maine to California. So that's fine for me. And, streaming networks, Netflix, Hulu, they have no problem at all with movies made for just U.S. distribution. So worked out really well, and I'm a happy guy.
Well, wow. I would say it sounds like it was a couple-year process, but really it was a 35-year process in order to really get to this moment in time. And when that happened and you actually got it June the 12th of last year, or whenever the official documentation all went through, was there an immediate feeling of, wow, I can't believe I have this. This is official now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because all along I said, Disney, the evil mouse, they're going to do something. They're going to sue me. They're going to do something. But the day came, the day went, and they did nothing. And a week later, I got an email from Disney saying, congratulations, you've got the rights. Live long and prosper. That's an interesting thing, because what my attorneys and my managers and all of my agents have told me is that most of the writers who get these rights back don't live long enough to enjoy them, So luckily, I sold the rights to Disney when I was 12 years old. So I still got
worked out well.
They got a lot of time to go, yeah.
Okay, was Disney, when you were optioning the book, you were talking about music publishers. I know that especially, 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s, some people were actually made careers off of just optioning the rights, and then the project wouldn't they wouldn't come through, and then they'd get the rights back and they'd option them off again. Was Disney the first stop that you made with Roger?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll kind of tell you how that worked. And in order to tell you how that worked, I got to kind of tell you how I wrote the book in the first place.
Would love to hear it.
It all started back when I was in like the second or third grade. And I was given an assignment by my teacher. She said, here's a picture. Take this picture home and color this picture in. And the whole point of the assignment was to stay inside the lines. That was the only point of the assignment. So I took that picture home and I looked at it. And, nobody was better at staying inside the lines than I was. I was excellent at staying inside the lines. I looked at that picture and it was a typical farm scene. Now I lived in a farm town. I didn't live on a farm. I lived in the town part, but I lived in a farm town. And So a typical kind of farm scene. There was a farmhouse, a barn, a meadow, a fence, and there was one cow standing all by itself out in the middle of the meadow. So I colored the farmhouse yellow, which was the color farmhouses were around that town. I colored the barn red, colored the grass green, colored the fence brown, and I come to the cow. And I'm looking at that cow, that poor, sad, lonely cow, all by itself out in the middle of that field. And my mother had always told me that when people were all alone, that they sometimes got blue. And I thought, works for people, must work for cows. So I colored the cow blue. And the next day I handed that picture into my teacher. And day after that, she passed them all back except for mine. And she said, Gary, she says, you come up here to the front of the class. And I thought, oh, I stayed inside the lines better than anybody. She says, now you face the class. Okay. So she put that picture up over my head, held it up over my head, and said, class, look at this stupid, stupid picture. She says, everybody knows that cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white. Sometimes cows are brown, black, and white, all three. She says, there is no such a thing as a blue cow. She said, Gary, don't you ever do anything this stupid again. She called my mom. My mom had to go to school. And the teacher said to her, I think there's something wrong with Gary. He colored a cow blue. So that night, my mom and dad called me into the living room. Now, this town, it was called Earlville, and it was 1,400 people, really small town. My dad ran the pool hall in that town. My mom worked in the school cafeteria. So these were not what you would call highly educated urban liberals. I mean, these were hardscrabble working folk. And my mom said to me, she's, Gary, I had to go to school today to talk to your teacher. Why did you color a cow blue? And I said, Mom, it wasn't me. It was you, because you were the one who told me that when people get sad and lonely, they get blue. So sad and lonely cow, blue cow. So she said, okay, so you go out in the yard and play for a while. Your dad and I have to talk about this. So, I didn't think this was going to have a good ending for me because, like I say, these were not well-educated people. My dad had to drop out of school in the third grade during the Depression to go to work. My mom made it to the eighth grade before she had to drop out and go to work. So I didn't really think this was going to have a happy ending for me. But, after about 15 minutes, they called me back in. My mom says, Gary, she said, your dad and I talked about it, and we decided the next time you want to color cow blue, you go ahead and color cow blue. And she called my teacher and says, next time he does something like that, let him do it. He's creative. And so, I don't know, 2 weeks later, we got another assignment. What did you do on your summer vacation? And the other kids, this was a small Illinois town. They wrote, I went to Chicago. I went to the Museum of Science and Industry. I went to Starved Rock State Park. I went to Wisconsin. And I wrote a one-page essay on how I went out into my backyard and I used a couple of cardboard boxes, some tin foil, some string, and a bunch of cans. And I built a rocket ship and I flew to the moon. And the teacher just passed it back the next day. So that was quite a trip. So, that was the start of it. I've still got that picture still hanging on my wall over my desk. From then on, I colored a lot of cows blue, and I started writing short stories. I had written, 50 short stories. Never had a reject. They all got published. And I decided that, instead of writing 50 short stories, for 12 short stories, I could write one novel and maybe I could get that published. So I wrote a novel called Killer Bowl, which was a novel about a dystopian future where football was played as a blood sport. He played it with weapons and played it on the city streets. It actually kind of predicts MMA fighting. What they're doing on the front lawn of the White House right now, I predicted back in 1970s. It predicted the cell phone, the internet, the gas crisis, a whole bunch of stuff. And I had an agent. My agent sent it to Doubleday. Doubleday bought it. And not only bought it, but they gave me a contract for 3 more novels. And my editor was over the moon. She said, I love your work. She said, I'm going to give you a contract for 3 novels. Write whatever you want, we'll publish it. So the second one was called A Generation Removed, which was, a book about the kind of ageist war between young people and old people. The third one was a book called The Resurrectionist, about a guy who exists inside the wires in a time travel universe. But for the fourth novel, I wanted to do something that incorporated the loves of my youth. And the loves of my youth were 2 things. And again, my mother enters into this. My mother once told me when I was young, she said, if you want to get out of this town, you don't want to wind up running your father's pool hall. The one thing you can do to make that happen is to read. Read. Just read all the time. Read whatever you can get your hands on. And that's what's going to get you out of this town. And I said, okay. So, I read all the time. I was constantly reading. But what did I read? I was a kid. I read comic books. I read Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Donald Duck, Uncle Scrooge, even romance comics, true romance, whatever you had, I read it. And, my mom never once said, don't read that. That'll rot your brain. As long as I was reading, she was fine with that. The other thing that I read was something that my dad read. And my dad read magazines that were called true crime magazines. I don't think they exist anymore. I hope not. But in the 50s, they were very popular. And they were magazines with pictures in them and stories. And they detailed true crimes, always murders. And the pictures were actual pictures of the murder scene. If you ever saw a movie called Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks,
yes,
Jude Law plays a photographer who's based on a real guy named Weejan, who would go to crime scenes, get there before the police, and rearrange the bodies so they were more photogenic, and then take a picture and sell them to these true crime magazines. So I read those. And again, my mom never said a word. Hey, he's reading. So luckily, I graduated to a better class of crime fiction: Dashiell Hammett, Mickey Spillane, Cornell Woolrich. But the 2 loves of my life from my youth were comic books, cartoon strips, comic strips from newspapers, cartoons in the movies, and hardboiled private eyes. I love that stuff. So I wanted to write a book that incorporated those elements. Not easily done. So I was watching Saturday morning cartoons one Saturday morning. And, the cartoons themselves were pretty bad. Not at all like the cartoons I used to see, the old MGM, Tex Avery stuff, pretty bad. But I was fascinated by the commercials because I saw cartoon characters, the Trix Rabbit, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Captain Crunch, Tony the Tiger. They were talking to real kids, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I said, wow, what a great concept that would be for a book. What if you had a world where cartoon characters were real? So I spent a year working out the details, all the kinds of things that a cartoon character, a comic book character does that would be fun if I put it into a real world. And in my first book, which turned out to be Who Censored Roger Rabbit, the characters, Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman, are characters who appear in comic books and comic strips. And instead of talking in words, they talk in word balloons. So you don't listen to them, you read them. And if they turn around, then you have to either learn to read in reverse, or you have to go around to the front of them and read. And these word balloons, they're kind of fragile and they break, and they kind of powder the cartoon character's shoulders with dandruff. And if you have a cartoon gun and you shoot somebody with it, it gives off a bang balloon. And if you're lucky and the bang balloon doesn't break when it hits the ground, and we're like Delft China and they're very fragile. But if it doesn't break, or even if it does, and you have a forensics balloon expert reassemble it, if you find the gun that you think committed the murder and shoot it and produce another bang balloon and put them together and they match, you got the gun, right? So I had a lot of fun with that. I mean, it was just terrific. I came up with characters, Roger Rabbit, because I wanted a kind of Disney-esque character. And this was way before my association with Disney. I just wanted a kind of Disney-esque character. I made my character in Who Censored Roger Rabbit brown because nobody at the time had a brown rabbit. They were all white or gray or whatever. So I made him brown rabbit, put him in overalls and a bow tie, and then I came up with Baby Herman, because in the 40s and 50s, a lot of comic books and comic strips had adult babies. There was a baby Huey and a baby Hugo, and they were all kind of like grown-up men who were still babies, right?
Right.
Then I came to Jessica, and in my hometown, through some fluke of genetics, the boys outnumbered the girls by 35-1. So, good luck getting a date if you're the president of the Checkers Club. Right? So, Jessica was my image of the kind of girl that I would date if I was ever able to get a date with any girl at all. And she was kind of an amalgam of all of the fantasy girls of my youth: Rita Hayworth, Betty Grable, Jane Russell, Marilyn Monroe. Especially Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake wore her hair over one eye. And interesting side note, that hairstyle became so popular during World War II that women who were working in defense plants were having an inordinately large amount of accidents because they all wore their hair over one eye. And so Veronica Lake, in a real show of patriotism, publicly cut her hair. And so anyway,
wow.
she was one of the other influence on Jessica was Red Hot Riding Hood, who was a cartoon character developed by Tex Avery. And if you look at Red Hot cartoons on YouTube, which you can find, there's Wild and Wolfie, Swing Shift Cinderella, a couple more, you'll see that she's clearly Jessica's grandmother. She is redheaded, has the same kind of wasp waist and disproportionate shape. She wears a red dress, although hers is short. And there's a scene where she does a dance in Swing Shift Cinderella, which is pretty close to the dance that Jessica does in Roger Rabbit. So, I finished the book and I gave it to my agent. He said, "Oh my God, this is incredible." So we sent it to double take, fourth book in my four-book contract. And for the first time in my writing career, I got a reject. They rejected my book. And I called my editor. I said, "Sure, why did you reject this book? This is the best thing I've ever written." She said, "Oh, I agree." She says, "It's wonderful." She said, I laughed all the way through it. It's innovative. There's nothing like it. But she said, "That's the problem. It's so different from anything you've written. It's so different from anything anybody's ever written that I had to send it to the marketing department. They were the ones who rejected it." And I said, "Okay." So I called the head of the marketing department. This was a double day. And I said, "Chuck, why did you reject my book?" He said, "Oh, we all love this book. This book was really great, but there's no category for this on the bookstore shelves. It's not a traditional mystery. It's not a children's book. It's not fantasy. It's not science fiction. There's no category for this. I can't sell this book." And I said, "Okay, Chuck, let me ask you, what would you do if you got Gulliver's Travels, The Wizard of Oz, or Alice in Wonderland today? What would you do with those?" And he thought for me, he says, "Well, I couldn't sell those either." So I went back to my agent. I said, "Bill, if I can't sell this book, I don't want to be a writer anymore, because this is what I want to do." He said, "Oh, no, wonderful book. We'll find a home for it." So he started sending it out to other editors, other publishing companies. And along the way, it got 110 rejects. 110 rejects because every single time the marketing department says, "We can't sell this book." In those days, I don't know how you get rejects. I don't get many rejects, but In those days, you got rejects in the mail. They came to you in a letter. And my wife used to call my trip outs in the mailbox every day the daily disappointments, because I'd come back with 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 rejects for Who Censored Roger Rabbit. And finally, it crossed the desk of a woman named Rebecca Martin at St. Martin's Press. And Rebecca had just edited a major bestseller for St. Martin's. And so they gave her a vanity project. They said, Rebecca, whatever you want to edit next, go ahead. You've got a vanity project, do whatever you want. And just at that time, Roger Rabbit crossed her desk. So she picked it up and read it, and she took Roger Rabbit directly to the president of the company and said, my vanity project, this is the book I want to do. So he said, okay, I'm going to read it tonight. I'll get back to you in the morning. So he went home, read it, came back to her in the morning, said, Rebecca, I told you that you could publish any book that you wanted, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. There's no category for this on my bookstore shelf. So Rebecca stepped up to the plate and said, look, you told me I could publish any book I wanted, publish that book or I quit. And so he published the book, and albeit in very small quantities, 5,000 copies of that book. And people ask me, if you had a time machine and you could go back in time and change one thing in your life, what would you do? If I could do that, I would go back to 1981 when that book came out, and I would buy all 5,000 copies, because it came out at $2.99. And if you can find a copy on eBay today, it goes north of $500. So I would have bought all 5,000 copies and put them in a barn somewhere. And I'd bring them out today and I'd sell them, and I'd be living in a castle in Spain, and I wouldn't be doing podcasts. Okay. So anyway, they agreed to print it. And that was 1980. It was scheduled to come out in print in 1981. It took a year to go through the process. So in mid 1980, the book hadn't come out. So mid 1980, I get a call at home phone. Hi, is this Gary K. Wolf? I said, yes, it is. He says, hi, this is Roy Disney with the Disney Company. Yeah, right. Roy Disney calling me at home. That's close. Then who is this really? He said, no, it's really Roy Disney. I just read your book, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in letting Disney turn it into a movie. I said, yeah, right. The book hasn't even come out yet. How'd you get a copy of my book? Well, it turns out there's somebody at St. Martin's, and I never found out who. I tried, because I wanted to kiss her or him full on the lips. Somebody sent a copy of the manuscript to Disney and said, hey, we're going to publish this book, and we think you'd like it. And it made its way up the chain, and it got to Roy Disney, and it turned out, yes, indeed, they did like it, and they did want to make it. And this was the perfect time for this book at Disney. This was 1980. Disney was no longer a first-rate movie production house. They were making movies like Flubber, The Nutty Professor, the Black Cauldron, the Black Hole, and the Black Cauldron disappeared down the black hole. So
yeah, it really did.
They were making movies that were intended to be the second half of double features, and double features were being phased out. So what were they going to do? They had been offered Jaws and they passed. They'd been offered E.T. and they passed. They'd been offered Star Wars and they passed. So they needed something that would kind of catapult them back into the forefront of movie making.
Yeah.
And they saw Roger Rabbit as being a project. So, they offered me more money for it than I made on everything I ever written, put together before that. So, and of course it was Disney. I didn't think that they could do justice to the book. I didn't think the book was filmable. But if they were willing to try, they'd go ahead. And for a long time, they kind of proved me right. They couldn't get it together. They tried doing live action and animation combined. It just didn't look right. It didn't look good. Admittedly, a lot of the technology we used in Roger Rabbit was invented for that movie and did not exist in 1980, 81, 82, 83, 84. Did not exist. So they were kind of rowing upstream. And then one day Roy came to me and said, Gary, we're not having any luck with this as a live action animated movie. What would you say if instead of cartoon characters, we had them be characters in costume like they are at Disneyland? And I'm thinking, oh no. I said, I'm going to have Fred McMurray as Eddie Valiant. I'm going to have Haley Mills as Jessica, Dean Jones as the Rabbit, and Kurt Russell as Baby Herman. I said, doesn't that violate the basic premise just a little bit? He said, yeah, all right. So they went on it. I don't know if they ever would have pulled it together, but in 1985, a couple of things happened. Roy Disney got kicked upstairs, and he was replaced by a guy named Michael Eisner.
Of course.
Mike brought with him a guy named Jeff Katzenberg, and Mike and Jeff had done a lot of stuff together, produced a lot of blockbusters for their studio. And the first thing they did when they came in was to cancel all the projects that Disney had going, because that's what you do when you clean house, all except for this one. And they had a meeting and they said, of all the projects that we've got, Roger Rabbit is the one project that we have to make this project. So they did something that Disney had never done before. They brought in an outside producer to produce this movie. And that was a little known guy named Steve Spielberg. All right. So Steve Spielberg comes on board. Now, all of a sudden, the whole character and complexion of the project changes, right? I mean, you got Steve Spielberg on board, and things start to happen. And to show you what a difference Steve Spielberg makes in Hollywood, in 1982 or 83, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers, and he said, "Look, we're doing this live action animated movie, all new characters. We'd like to have Bugs Bunny do a cameo. He'll come out, he'll say, 'What's up, Doc?' He'll bite a carrot, he'll go back. What do you think?" And Warner Brothers looked at Roy Disney and said, "Get lost. There's no way that Bugs Bunny is ever going to be in a Walt Disney picture. That is never going to happen." So in 1986, when Steve Spielberg makes the identical request, hey, we're doing this live action animated movie. Can we have Bugs Bunny cameo? Of course. Take them. And what about Porky Pig and Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and Yosemite Sam? I mean, take them all. Take them all. So Steven walked out with all the characters, with one provision. Bugs Bunny, being a cartoon superstar, had a contract. I suspect he probably had an agent too, but he definitely had a contract. And in Bugs's contract, it specified that Bugs and Mickey, as co-equal cartoon superstars, had to be in every scene together. Although it was worded so that Bugs had to be in every scene with Mickey. Bugs could be in a scene without Mickey, but Mickey could not be in a scene without Bugs, which in fact happened during the movie. And they also had to have the same identical number of words of dialogue.
Wow.
So if you watch the movie, you will see that Bugs is in every scene with Mickey Mouse. And if you count the number of words, they are identical. Now, the animators hated Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers wanted Disney to use the current 1986, 87 versions of Bugs, which were considerably different from the 1940s, 45, 46 versions of Bugs. He had a totally different head shape, totally different look. And the animators wanted to keep it consistent with the era and use
Period, yeah.
1946 Bugs. But Warner Brothers was adamant about it. No, we want the... So the animators did two versions. They did one with a 1946 bugs and one with the 1986 bugs. And they showed Warner Brothers the 1986 version, and they put the 1946 version in the movie. And Warner Brothers didn't realize it until they saw the movie when it came out.
I'm sure they were pleased.
They exploded. They exploded. But then the movie went on to be the highest grossing movie of the year. It caused a sensation. And they started to realize, wait a minute, maybe we can start making 1946 Bugs dolls. And there is one little anecdote I will tell you. Just keep it strictly to us, just between ourselves.
Of course.
The animators wanted to show their disdain for Warner Brothers kind of visually, and film goes through the camera at 24 frames a second.
Mm-hmm.
Animators realized very early on in the animation process, way back in Oog and Moog and Gertie the Dinosaur, and way back, that you could screw around with 6 of those 24 frames. So 6 24ths of a second, you could put in little visual gags, and the human eye couldn't see them. All right. So those go all the way back to the start of cartooning. They're called gags in the margins, and animators have been doing it forever. So they wanted to do a gag in the margin to get back at Warner Brothers. And what they wanted to have done was, when Bugs and Mickey are parachuting down, they wanted Mickey to give Bugs the finger. Okay. Now, the animation was being done by Dick Williams at his studio in London. And Dick had brought in animators from all over the world. A lot of them were from the Iron Curtain countries. When the Iron Curtain fell, a lot of them were from South America. They were all top-notch animators, but it was a real Tower of Babel over there. You know, if you wanted to speak to the Spanish guy, you had to speak to the Greek guy, who would speak to the Italian guy, who would speak to the Spanish guy, and it would go back there. So the guy who did that Mickey giving the finger scene was, I believe, Latvian. I can't remember. I think it's Latvian. So, 1, 2, 3 instructions. And when you see the scene, you will see that he screwed it up. And instead of Mickey giving Bugs the finger, it's Bugs giving Mickey the finger, which is entirely the wrong message. Entirely the wrong message.
Well, something got lost in translation, obviously.
Obviously. One interesting thing, as I say, that there are tons and tons of gags in the margins in the Roger Rabbit movie. And one of them, somebody just pointed out to me, and it is in that scene when Bugs is giving Mickey the finger. If you find that and look at the parachute cord that is extending behind Bugs, that's pulling his parachute out, written on the parachute cord is "Ringo is the Walrus."
Oh, yeah, in reference to the Beatles, right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So anyway, we were making the movie, and the things that we had to do to make the movie, we had to find an Eddie Valiant. I wanted Harrison Ford. We talked to him. He couldn't commit to that kind of time. It was going to take 5 years. He couldn't commit. I wanted Paul Newman. He couldn't commit. So we started talking to other people, Kurt Russell, a whole bunch of people. And finally, Disney came up with a guy. They wanted somebody bankable, because nobody really knew if this movie was going to be any good. They wanted somebody bankable.
And it was going to be expensive, right? I mean, it was going to be expensive to make.
Yeah, it was going to be expensive. It wound up being $75 million, which was pretty steep for the time. And they wanted to get their money back, but they wanted somebody bankable, somebody who would bring people into the theater, even if the movie was not that hot. So they found the guy that was the perfect Eddie Valiant, and he was a bankable guy, and that guy, of course, was Bill Murray. So Bill Murray is Eddie Valiant, and I'm looking at Bill Murray acting with Roger Rabbit, and he's the guy that's got to convince the audience that Roger Rabbit is real. Well, that's kind of hard to do, because Bill Murray doesn't believe that Rabbit is real. He keeps looking up, oh my God, you're a talking rabbit. What are you doing? I'm talking, oh my God. So finally Disney saw the light, and they got rid of him, paid him off out of his contract, $1 million to buy him out of his contract, and kept looking. So, finally we found the guy that Disney said, now this is the perfect Eddie Valiant. He will bring people into the seats, perfect Eddie Valiant. That guy, of course, was Eddie Murphy. So now we have a black Eddie Valiant, which is fine. But Eddie Murphy is rewriting the script so that he is funnier than the tunes. And obviously that doesn't work either. So they pay him off, give him $1 million and a Ferrari. Ferrari of it. In the meantime, over on the other side of Hollywood, Brian De Palma is making a movie called The Untouchables. And he desperately wants Bobby De Niro to play Al Capone. But De Niro is tied up with another project. So as a backup, he brings in a British actor named Bob Hoskins to play Al Capone. So Bob Hoskins is playing Al Capone for De Palma. And about 2 weeks into the filming, De Niro calls up and says, hey, I finished early. I could be in your movie. I could be Al Capone. So they buy Bob Hoskins out. Now, Bob Hoskins has got $1 million and nothing to do, right? So they said, hey, let's have this guy Bob Hoskins come in and read for the part. I said, oh, geez. Oh, by the way, you see how you make money in Hollywood? You never work.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, Hoskins told me a story about how he called De Palma afterwards, after he got the check for $1 million. He called De Palma and says, look, if you've got any other movies that you don't want me in, I'll be happy to not do it. So,
what a great line.
They said, Hoskins, let's bring Hoskins in. Well, I'd seen everything Hoskins had done. Mona Lisa, Long Good Friday, which was brilliant. And I said, he's an incredible actor, but he's Cockney British. How's he going to bring off an LA Private Eye? So we brought him in, and he was standing on a bare stage and nothing around him, making it all up in his head. And by golly, he convinced you that Rabbit was there. And he spoke in a perfect LA Private Eye accent. Perfect. So, we brought him on board, and he's really what made the movie. He was the art of perfection in the scene where he is handcuffed to Roger.
Yeah, and they're going through they're at the diner and going through the part where they had his office with the hyenas, the jackals.
If you look at the scene where he's handcuffed to Roger, those handcuffs are on springs. So Hoskins has to remember where his hand goes, where the rabbit's hand goes, and he has to move his hand and the handcuff on the end of the spring to make the rabbit's hand go where the rabbit's hand is supposed to go. In the scene where Hoskins gets thrown out of the Ink and Paint Club and lands on those boxes, he was obviously on a wire, but at the end they did drop him, so he landed on the boxes. He broke 3 ribs. And we thought, oh, geez, there goes the production schedule. We're going to have to wait for 6 months for Hoskins. Came in the next day, taped up. Okay, let's go. And, it was just the art of perfection. People ask me, do you have any regrets about the Roger Rabbit movie? Anything that you really regret? And I do. I have one really big one. It is that Bob Hoskins didn't even get nominated for an Academy Award for doing what I think was the most incredible acting job that I have ever seen.
It's brilliant.
I mean, there were times when he was on a bare stage, making it all up in his head, and he had you believe it. Toward the end of the filming, he told me that he could see the rabbit. The rabbit was real to him, and he could see the rabbit. And it took about 6 months before the rabbit finally disappeared. And his son was really ticked off because he felt that the rabbit was competing for attention with his son. Hoskins was talking to the rabbit.
More than his kid, yeah.
Interesting animation tidbits, Bob Hoskins had to look the rabbit in the eyes. That's
Right.
what made that movie believable. The fact that whenever he talked to Roger, he was looking Roger directly in the eyes. And there's a scene happens late in the movie, but was actually filmed almost at the beginning of the movie when we started filming, where they're in the alleyway and he grabs Roger and holds him up. And he's looking Roger in the eyes. And of course, we filmed it. There was nothing there. The animators then put the rabbit and all the animated characters in after. Well, Hoskins had not yet perfected the knack of looking the rabbit directly in the eyes, and he was looking too high. And so they said, well, we could refilm, we could reshoot, but let's see what we can do with animation. So in that scene, if you look at it, Roger kind of extends, he elongates so that Hoskins is looking him in the eye, and Roger's neck is kind of long and his body is kind of long. So they kind of did that, and it really worked. Next thing we had to do was, find a suitable voice of Jessica, and that was actually pretty easy. Bob Zemeckis, who directed the film, had worked with Kathleen Turner on Romancing the Stone,
of course.
Which is actually where I first met them, at a charity event for Romancing the Stone. I met Zemeckis and Kathleen Turner years before Roger Rabbit, but I fell in love with Kathleen Turner as every
Of course.
red-blooded man is.
Yes.
And so she did the voice, but when it came time to sing the song, she was 8 months pregnant, and whether she just didn't have breath control or whether she just can't sing, I don't know. But she couldn't sing the song. She just couldn't sing the song. So Steve Spielberg was there with his wife at the time, Amy Irving, and he said, Amy, you sang a Yentl. Why don't you give it a whack? And I said, Steve, nobody's going to believe that Jessica has one voice when she's singing and a totally different voice when she's speaking. He said, nobody will even notice, and nobody ever did. So Amy Irving sang the song. Kathleen, she did all the voice work before even film was shot. She'd seen the script, but like I say, nobody knew if this movie was going to be any good. Nobody knew if this was going to be a kids movie, an adult movie. Nobody knew. So rather than risk her career, she decided to do the role uncredited. There is no screen credit in that movie for Kathleen Turner. She did the same thing that James Earl Jones did with Star Wars when he voiced Darth Vader, because nobody knew if that was going to be any good. Then when it turned out to be great, James Earl Jones came out and said, yeah, I was the voice of Darth Vader. And so Kathleen Turner said, well, I'll do the same thing. If the movie's great, then I'll come out and say, I'm the voice of Jessica Rabbit. If the movie's a bomb, I'll hide under a rock and nobody will ever know. Amy Irving did take screen credit. And if you sit there through the credits, which run the length of a lot of early movies, you'll see Jessica's singing voice, Amy Irving. So, we basically made the movie. It took from 85 to 88. And the movie premiered at Radio City Music Hall in New York City so that I would not have to go to LA. So I went to Radio City, and they were still working on it up to like a week before it came out. So I had never seen the whole movie altogether. I had never seen my credit. I didn't know what that was going to look like. So I was sitting in the VIP section, and I had Kathleen Turner on one side of me, Amy Irving on the other side of me. And I'm sitting between the two most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life. And I'm about to watch my movie start to finish for the first time, see my credit on screen for the very first time. And I'm thinking to myself, life just doesn't get any better than this. And then, by golly, life got better because Kathleen reached over and put her hand on my leg and whispered in my ear, Gary, are you excited? Yeah. And I said, Kathleen, you have no idea. So, the movie came out, wound up being the best reviewed movie of the year, the highest grossing movie of the year, made I think 100 million the first year. Last accounting that I've seen, of course now it's a 35-year-old movie, but last accounting I've seen is still earning, and it's up over $1 billion now.
It's an amazing movie, and it's an amazing story. To hear you tell it, you're going from a blue cow to Kathleen Turner holding your leg about to watch your movie. It's quite the journey, and Roger Rabbit is an incredible film. I would love, Gary, if we could actually set some time to do a follow-up to this, because I have about a litany of questions, but I'm against a time wall to get to my next segment. But I would love the opportunity to do this again with you. You are so detailed in everything, and it's amazing. I could listen to you for hours, and I would love the ability to be able to do that.
Eventually you're going to get bored. I have that effect.
I don't think so. I really don't.
Eventually you're going to strangle me or say, "Shut up! I want to hear."
I've never been so mad at the time and the clock as I am in this very moment, because this is one of my favorite films of all time. I've also read the books and have questions about those. So I'd love to set up a follow-up if we could do that.
Absolutely. Sure. Love to do it. I mean, nobody talks to me anyway. I sit here in my poor lonely garret all day with nobody to talk to, all by myself. So always happy to do this.
Well, and look, and even if we're not doing it on the air, you can call me anytime. I'd love to listen to these stories all day. But Gary, I do appreciate your time, sir, and thank you for not only taking the time, but for creating something that I've loved my entire life. I don't remember a time in my life where there wasn't a Roger Rabbit. It's kind of been a part of my whole human existence so far. So from your mind to the screen, from Robert Zemeckis and Steve Spielberg to the hearts.
One more story?
Yeah.
One more story for you?
Go for it.
Okay. So when Steve Spielberg went out and got the cartoon characters from other studios, he wanted to make sure that all of the key players had his or her favorite cartoon character. And Bob Zemeckis was a Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Bob Hoskins was Heckle and Jekyll. Dick Williams, the lead animator, was Droopy. So Steve comes to me and he says, "Gary," he said, "what's your favorite character? I want to make sure I get your favorite character." And he says, "Steve, I got Roger, I got Jessica, I got Baby Herman. I think I'm covered." He says, "I want to do something for you anyway." He says, "I'll do something. You'll know." So as I say, gag in the margin, 24 frames a second. 6/24 of a second, when Eddie Valiant is driving through the tunnel into Toontown, and as he's driving, it's dark. All of a sudden, the curtains lift, and it's birds, and it's dancing fairies and bright color and music. 6/24 of a second. If you look to the left, blink and you'll miss it. You're going to see a yellow farmhouse, a red barn, a green meadow, a brown fence, and a blue cow standing all by itself out in the middle of that field.
Wow. Full circle, quite literally, right? The moment of inspiration that started the whole journey is captured in its immortality on film.
Blue cows are us.
Blue cows are us. Well, Gary, thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for all the stories. We will set up another time here soon.
Hey, and can I plug my website?
Go for it. Yes.
www.garywolf.com. You will read all about me, and you'll be able to buy my books. And everybody should buy my books because they're works of towering genius.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. And there'll be a link in the show notes for all our listeners. You can click to Gary's website and check out everything that he's got going on. Again, we'll set up another time here in the near future because I have so many more questions.
Absolutely. That was fun. Thanks a lot for having me.